You pull into the driveway, engine off, but you don't get out yet. For about 90 seconds, you just sit there, hands still on the wheel, watching nothing through the windshield. And in that 90 seconds, something quiet happens that you've probably never named. One version of you steps down and another one steps up. The voice you used in meetings today softens by half. Your shoulders drop maybe 2 inches. The face you'd been holding for 9 hours finally lets go. Then you open the door, and you walk into your house as someone slightly different than the person who walked into the office this morning. Nobody taught you to do that, you just do it. Every single day. The word for what you are, depending on who you ask, is two-faced, or fake, or always on. And if you've ever caught yourself in that 90-second pause and felt something like guilt, like you were getting away with something, you're not the only one. But here's what nobody tells you. The gap between your two selves isn't a character flaw. It isn't even unusual. What's unusual is being conscious enough to notice it, and what's painful about it has almost nothing to do with the performance, and almost everything to do with something much quieter and much lonelier that we'll get to in a minute. In 1959, a sociologist named Irving Goffman wrote a book called The Presentation of Self in Everyday Life. His argument was, on the surface, simple. Human beings are always performing, not in a fake way, in a theatrical way. We have a front stage where we play the role our audience expects: the professional, the polite stranger, the calm parent, the funny friend. And we have a backstage where the performance comes off: the kitchen at a restaurant, the bedroom after a dinner party, the car after work. Everyone has a backstage. That's not the unusual part. The unusual part, the thing that makes someone feel like they're living two lives instead of one, is when the backstage has slowly grown into its own whole world, a whole second self, a whole second set of opinions, hobbies, voices, even names, a self that has its own interior weather, its own taste in music, its own way of laughing, and that almost nobody in the front stage world has ever met. That's not pretending. That's something else. The psychoanalyst Donald Winnicott had a name for it. In 1960, he described what he called the true self and the false self. It sounds dramatic. He meant something gentle. The false self, he said, isn't a lie. It's a protector. It's the part of you that learned, very early, what the room needed you to be, and shaped itself accordingly, so the part underneath could stay safe. If you grew up in a house where it wasn't okay to be sad, you built a cheerful one. If your culture punished softness, you built a hard one. If your work rewards a confidence you don't always feel, you built a confident one. The false self isn't deception. It's architecture. It's the building the true self lives inside of. The cost of running it, though, is real. Recent research on what psychologists now call masking, most of it from the autistic and ADHD communities, where this was first studied seriously, has linked sustained masking to exhaustion, burnout, and a specific kind of low-grade grief that has no obvious source. You come home tired in a way sleep doesn't fix, because you weren't just working. You were holding a shape. If any of this is starting to sound like the inside of your own head, you might want to subscribe. But before that, the honest part, there's a version of the two-life experience that crosses a line when the false self has been on duty for so long, for so many years, that the true self starts to go quiet. You stop being able to answer simple questions about yourself. What do you actually like? What do you actually want? The architecture is still standing, but you can't quite find the person it was built to protect. Clinicians call this dissociation or identity diffusion, and it's worth taking seriously. Having two selves is human. Losing track of one of them is something else. And here's the part almost nobody says out loud. In the 1970s, a psychologist named Mark Snyder developed something called the self-monitoring scale, a measure of how much someone adapts their behavior across different social contexts. Decades of data later, the finding is not what people assume. High self-monitors, the people who live the largest gap between their public and private selves, are not the broken ones. They tend to be more socially perceptive, more emotionally intelligent, more skilled at reading what a room needs, and statistically more successful in roles that demand moving between different worlds. The duality isn't dysfunction, it's range. But here's what the research doesn't quite capture, and what almost every person who lives two lives eventually figures out on their own. The exhaustion isn't from the performance. The performance gets easier. The exhaustion is from being the only witness to one of yourselves. You wrote it, you directed it, you starred in it, and the audience is just you. Year after year, the private self does the most interesting thinking of your life at 1 a.m. In the journal nobody reads, in the playlists you'd never play in the car, and nobody sees it. That's the wait. That's what the 90 seconds in the driveway is actually about. The instinct, when you finally name all this, is to want to merge, to integrate, to finally be oneself in front of everyone. And maybe, slowly, in pieces, you will. But that's not the thing that lifts the weight. What lifts the weight is being witnessed, one person. Sometimes that's all it takes. One person who has met both selves and stayed for both. A partner who has seen the version of you that doesn't perform and didn't flinch. A friend who knows the music you'd never admit to liking. A sibling who remembers who you were before the architecture went up. The loneliness of two lives isn't solved by deleting one of them. It's solved by letting someone in. You don't need a different self. You need a witness. So tell me, honestly, which version of yourself feels more like the real one? The one the world has met? Or the one that only shows up when the door closes and the engine clicks off?